Hey guys, it's Justin. I just watched all of the Studio Ghibli films, all 22 of them, and I gotta say, they're really good. You've gotta check them out if you haven't checked them out already, but I wanted to put them all in a rank and kind of rank them top to bottom of my personal favorite Studio Ghibli films of all time. So I have a tier list here pulled up. Let's just start rolling through them. Now, a disclaimer before I begin. I did watch them all dubbed, except for Ocean Waves, which does not have an English dub to it. For some of you sub purists out there, sorry. But I did want to watch them dubbed, and overall the dubbing job was extremely well done. But I did want to put that disclaimer on there, and a lot of these movies can be rearranged in almost any order. I'll get into a little bit of that later on. But first, let's start at the bottom, number 22. And it's going to be Tales from Earthsea. If you've seen all the Studio Ghibli films, you kind of know where I'm coming from on this one. Overall, the plot just didn't make sense. I couldn't really get behind the Cobb character, the main villain of the story. Just immense plot holes. I know it was adapted from a book series, and the book series I haven't read yet. I've heard it's really good, and I've heard that the author didn't even like the film that she saw. She said it wasn't even her story anymore. Like, they took her novels and they made it into a movie, but it's not a retelling of her novels. It's just the same characters. And it really lacked direction. And most certainly is I would say, the weak link in all of these films. Almost all of these films are absolutely gorgeous and wonderfully done. This is kind of the lone one that's it's not the greatest. But let's continue on. So that one belongs kind of in my F tier here, kind of at the bottom. It's not saying it's a bad movie. These are ranks of Studio Ghibli films. So as Studio Ghibli films come, this one is in that bottom tier. The next film in my list is going to go in the D tier here is Ocean Waves. This one, there's not a lot to it. It is one of the shorter, or if not the shortest, Studio Ghibli film with, I think, a running time of less than an hour and a half. But there's just not much in terms of plot. The characters are kind of interesting, but as far as Studio Ghibli films go, this one did not have that same magic that we grow to know and love from Studio Ghibli. So that's why this one is ranked as low as it is. The next one for me, some people have this one really high. I don't. This is Pom Poko. I'm sorry. This one just did not connect with me. You have a bunch of tanukis or raccoon dogs, and basically they are trying to save their forest from urban developments. And it got a lot of the designs of all of the raccoons kind of looked the same. So it was a little hard to follow which raccoon was which. But overall, this one was a struggle to get through for me. It was rather long. I think it could have been cut down by at least 30 minutes and still gotten across everything it needed to come across. Yeah, and then the raccoon pouches. Yeah. So that's where that one falls for me. The next one, and a lot of people have this one really high, but for me, it's got to go down here. It's Grave of the Fireflies. This is a film that you only watch once. If I had known what I was getting into, I still probably would have watched it because I wanted to watch all the Studio Ghibli films. Oh boy. It's a great film for what it tells and the story it tells. But spoiler alert, when you have to watch a boy cremate his younger sister, I get the point it was trying to say. I get that it was semi-based on true events after the bombings of World War II in Japan. But of all the Studio Ghibli films, this is one that I will probably never watch again. For me, I can't make it through this film again. It's really well done. The animation's really great. It did its job. It told its story. But nobody is going to get around the television on a Saturday night and ask the family, hey, what Studio Ghibli film would y'all like to see? And everyone's going to raise their hand and say, Grave of the Fireflies! Yeah, nobody's going to say that. It's not going to happen. Continuing on. Another one that a lot of people have highly ranked, but we're now up to the C tier for me, is The Tale of Princess Kaguya. I love the watercolor. I think the watercolor was beautifully animated. It was a really original idea for the animation style, and I can tell that a lot of time and effort went into creating this film. It is the longest Studio Ghibli film, and I felt that it was a little too long. I think it was about 2 hours, 20 minutes almost. They really could have cut it down a little bit, but for me, the plot just kind of fell a little flat for me. The characters were somewhat engaging, but I can't really rank it any higher than this. Another one that falls kind of in that same area is The Wind Rises. This is a tale of Japanese aviator of World War II, note the war theme here, who's trying to design these airplanes to help. Well, he's not designing them to help Japan win World War II. He's designing them for the sense that he loves airplanes and he wants to design the greatest airplanes ever. For me, the music in this film did not really match the film itself. You have a Japanese aviator who is dreaming and talking to this Italian aviator, and I heard like some Greek instruments, and then they also visit Germany for a time. So the music for me on this one just didn't match the film, and then the plot was okay. Wasn't really anything too special for me on this one. So I can't really rank it any higher than that. The next one is The Secret World of Arrietty, or just Arrietty here. I need to put it right here. Come on. There we go. This one is beautifully animated. This one, you could take any still image of this film and hang it up in your wall as a work of art. And it truly is a work of art in that sense. There's not a lot going on in terms of plot in this film, and that's why I have it ranked as low as I do. The characters are engaging, the scenery and all of the animation's great. It's just the plot has a lot of gaps in it, and the gaps are filled with pop music, which I get. It's trying to me, this is Studio Ghibli trying to emulate a more Western animation style, a more almost American style of film. There's long periods in this film that the animation style is beautiful, and we hear this pop music that I'm not a big fan of. I think it's a cheap cop-out when it comes to films, especially animation films, where you have all this period of time where you see all this action going on screen, there's not much dialogue, and then you hear these pop music songs, which I get the tie-in. You're trying to appeal to a wider audience, but for me, I think you could do it with more orchestral work, or add in more dialogue, or something, give me more substance to it. So that's The Secret World of Arrietty for me. Now we're going to go up to the B tier. And again, in these tiers, I'm pretty good with the films that are included in each tier. but they could honestly be flip-flopped back and forth and rearranged, and I have rearranged quite a few of these already. Let's see, the next one is right here, When Marnie Was There. This one, I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I first started the film, and I kind of did that for all of these films. I purposefully didn't watch the trailers, I didn't read synopsis of the film. I wanted to go in cold to each one of these films. This is one that, for me, it kept feeling like it was going to turn into like a Stephen King type animation. The plot kept looking like it was going to turn darker and darker and darker, and it never did. So I need to rewatch this one again, just to going in with that mindset that this is a Studio Ghibli film. This is geared towards, families, and that's kind of the, the audience for a lot of these films. But I will say, in the last 15 or so minutes of this film, you better have a box of tissues ready. I cried after watching this film for like 20 minutes after watching this one. I was not just tearing up, I was flat out crying. It was that sad. And yet they somehow turned it around from being like the saddest story in all of Studio Ghibli to still having a happy ending, which I was very happy about. But if you do watch this one, make sure you do have the tissues ready. It is a tearjerker. The next one, and this is gonna upset quite a few Studio Ghibli fans that I have it this low. Again, these are my rankings. My Neighbor Totoro. This is the mascot of Studio Ghibli. The mascot of Studio Ghibli is Totoro. This is one of their staple films. For me, it's a lot like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the 1971 version with Gene Wilder, in the sense that the title character doesn't appear until 2/3 of the way into the film. Now, once the title character is there, like when Willy Wonka first appears, it's like, oh my gosh, Gene Wilder's amazing. And you get to go on this ride with him, and you're left wondering why you couldn't have seen him earlier and couldn't have spent more time with him. That's kind of how I felt with My Neighbor Totoro. The title character doesn't appear until at least halfway through the film, if not 2/3 of the way through the film, before we finally get to see Totoro. And when we get to see Totoro, it's magical, it's wonderful, it's engaging, it's just amazing. And it makes you wonder why we couldn't have had that moment earlier and had it a little bit longer. This one, I do believe, is geared more towards kids, so I may not be the target audience for this film. But I do think the young kids will definitely enjoy My Neighbor Totoro. It will become a huge family classic that the young kids will definitely enjoy watching. I say young kids, I'm not that old. I'm old, but I'm not that old. But to me, the first half of the film, it was slow, and it was very much geared towards younger kids. So that's why I have it personally a lot lower than most people do. Moving along to Only Yesterday. This is one that doesn't get a lot of appreciation, and I'm a little baffled by that. This is a real film. There's no magic. There's no fairy tales. There's none of that. It's just a real story about real life. And I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a nice take, a nice breath of fresh air, so to speak, from some of these other films. And the plot was interesting. It was definitely engaging, and a lot of people haven't actually seen this one, that have maybe seen almost all of the Studio Ghibli films. This is definitely one to look up and to check out. It doesn't get much higher than a B ranking on this, but honestly, the B ranking here, we're kind of in these films are really good. There's just a couple more that I enjoyed a little bit more. The next one is My Neighbors, the Yamadas. This is the only true comedy on this list. And I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was great. I laughed a lot. I could connect with the characters a lot. For those who haven't seen My Neighbors the Yamadas, it's basically The Simpsons meets Peanuts meets Japan. That's how best I can sum up My Neighbors the Yamadas. The entire film, which is I think a little over 2 hours, is basically just little vignettes, little mini episodes, so to speak, of the same characters. There's not too much overarching story. There's just little snippets here, just kind of taking a little snapshot of the life in the Yamadas, the Yamada family. It's very much reminiscent of some of those Peanuts comic strips, combined with the humor of The Simpsons meeting Japanese culture. So I personally really like My Neighbors the Yamadas. I do look forward to watching it again sometime. There were a few of those little short vignettes that didn't quite fit the culture difference. But aside from that, I think it was a really solid film. So we've reached the halfway point of the films. We've ranked 11 now out of the 22. And these next 11, I feel, are on a different level than the 11 that I've just ranked. I feel that there is a clear cutoff point, at least in my rankings, of the top 11 tier and the bottom 11 tier. So let's dive right into these. And I'm going to start with Ponyo. If you haven't seen Ponyo yet, and you may be like me, when I first saw it, I'm like, that animation style looks great. It's very vibrant, very colorful, but it looks really kiddie. It looks like it's really geared towards those young kids, kind of like My Neighbor Totoro. The difference is Ponyo is very engaging and throughout the entire film. It's based on The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen, but to me, it actually shares, I think, more in common with Lilo and Stitch than The Little Mermaid. But the music is fantastic. The characters are interesting and engaging. And it is geared more towards younger kids, but I feel that this one is more deserving of a higher rank than My Neighbor Totoro. And I really enjoyed Ponyo. So if you haven't seen Ponyo, definitely check it out. The next one is the only spin-off / sequel on this list, and that's The Cat Returns. This is a spin-off of the Baron, a anthropomorphic cat character from Whisper of the Heart. And The Cat Returns is one of the shorter Studio Ghibli films, and I think it really worked for this one. This one is simple. The plot isn't too invasive. It's got great characters. Cary Elwes, Anne Hathaway. I can't think of the guy's name. I think his first name is Peter. He played Ray Romano's dad in Everybody Loves Raymond. I'm going to think of his name in a minute. Anyway, those actors and actresses, I think this really meshed for me, and I think they really brought these characters to life. I'm a huge Cary Elwes fan, by the way. I absolutely love him and his films. I think he's a fantastic actor. And he really brought the character of the Baron to life. This film doesn't try too hard to be anything special. It just creates this engaging environment and story, and it knows right when to cut off. I mean, I personally felt this film could have been a little bit longer, but I would rather feel that than feel like the film was too long. Like in the case of The Tale of Princess Kaguya, I felt was really long. Pom Poko, films like that. So this one knew when to hit the brakes, when to cut it off, and it's just a really fun film that a lot of people don't have it ranked nearly as high as I do right here. And this is actually number 10 in the rankings, and we're moving on right now to number 9, From Up on Poppy Hill. This is Hayao Miyazaki's son's second directorial debut. The first one was down here in the bottom tier with Tales from Earthsea. This one, he got it right. He really developed himself as a director. This one is another one that doesn't involve magic and Um, it's just a real story about real people, and it's very engaging. I felt the soundtrack and the score to this one was really great. It's set in 1964, I believe, when Tokyo hosted the Summer Olympic Games, and the soundtrack has that nostalgic feel to it. It opens with this lovely, almost ragtime piano part, and it's kind of got that almost 1920s, 30s, just kind of nostalgic feel to the film, and I think it really works for it. Yeah, it's just overall a really great film. I definitely look forward to watching that one again. The next one is going to be Porco Rosso. If you would have told me that I would enjoy watching a film about an anthropomorphic pig who's also kind of like the Red Baron from World War I. I mean, that only exists in anime. Only in anime can you have something like that. And if you really want to introduce somebody to the world of anime, Porco Rosso is the perfect starting point. This, to me, epitomizes the genre of anime. And honestly, the music is great. The plot, there's not too much going on, but at the same time, the characters are so engaging, and it's so the animation is so beautiful that it's just, who needs much of a plot? Honestly, we'll get into another film that fits into that category in just a second. Now we're moving on to the S tier. These next films, I think, are just the absolute pinnacle of Studio Ghibli films. And we're going to start it with Princess Mononoke. This is one of the grittiest Studio Ghibli films, and I believe the only one rated PG-13 for violence. You see, people's heads get cut clean off, and there will be blood in this one. But it really tells an engaging story that just captivates you. And you see these characters, Ashitaka and San, and you just really start to just follow along with their story. And the music in this one, to me, is one of, I believe this is Joe Hisaishi's films, and it's really quite well done. The ending credits here, that piano part is probably one of his best themes of all time. Really, really well done. The next one is Whisper of the Heart. This is another one that doesn't involve a lot of fanciful magics to create a story. This one is a just wonderful tale of, what was her name? Shizuku, who wants to be a writer. And going through her daily life, almost, she goes on a little bit of an adventure, kind of following a cat. And this is where the cat returns kind of spins off from. We see a little bit of the Baron in this film, but the cat returns really focuses more on the Baron. To me, this one is one I could watch over and over and over and not get bored with it. It's a wonderful, heartwarming story. It's a love story, but it's engaging, and it's for all ages. I highly recommend Whisper of the Heart. I don't think it quite gets as much credit as some of the other films I'm about to rank here, but it's definitely one of the top Studio Ghibli films, in my opinion. The next one, most people have either number 1 or number 2, and that's Spirited Away. That's not saying Spirited Away is a bad film. No, Spirited Away is my number 5 film of Studio Ghibli. It's still in my top 5. I can already see the comments going, why do you have Spirited Away so low? I just have 4 other films I liked a little bit better, honestly. The world that Hayao Miyazaki created in Spirited Away is second to none. the creative genius that it took to create such an expansive world that he did in Spirited Away, and all these characters, is just absolute genius. I love Spirited Away. The music is great. The characters are so diverse and engaging, and the plot is really quite something. If you haven't seen Spirited Away, it is definitely one to check out. My next one, I honestly flip-flop these two back and forth almost on a daily basis. But I'm going to go ahead and put Kiki's Delivery Service at number 4. This is one that, honestly, who needs much of a plot? This film is so fun and free-spirited, and the characters are just quite amazing. The animation in this one is really well done. The animation in every single one is really well done. I can't stress that enough, how beautiful these hand-drawn animations are from Studio Ghibli. Every single time they bring out these films, they're just beautiful, beautiful films. Kiki's Delivery Service is actually the only one of these that I had seen before recent. I decided to go on a Studio Ghibli binge because I hadn't seen almost any of them, but I had seen Kiki's Delivery Service. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago it was because I would really date myself, but I will tell you I rented it at Blockbuster, if that gives you any indication. But this one is so fun and enjoyable, and it's just a wonderful, it's not quite a coming of age story. It kind of stops just before that, and it doesn't get too preachy in the sense that in a lot of these films that have these coming of age stories, you see kids either have to really grow up and become adults to save either their family or their friends or themselves. And this one just really, I think, strikes a chord with just staying true to who you are. And I think that's one of the strong themes throughout Kiki's Delivery Service, is just accepting who you are. And honestly, there's not many films that are more well done than Kiki's Delivery Service. This is one of the first Studio Ghibli films, and to this day it still lasts, and it's still great. Number 3, this is one I keep flip-flopping back and forth with Kiki's Delivery Service, and that's Howl's Moving Castle. This one is so good. Joe Hisaishi's, I'm going to think of the word here, composition, there we go. His composition here of the merry-go-round of life, the main theme that plays throughout Howl's Moving Castle, I think is one of the greatest film themes of all time. And that's up there with John Williams, Star Wars, E.T., and others. So the film itself, overall, beautifully done. The plot is engaging. It's got Christian Bale and Billy Crystal and a very, very young Josh Hutcherson, who I did not recognize initially. But this is just a fun film. It really goes into more of the fantasy style of Studio Ghibli and the fantasy style of anime. But this one has become a personal favorite of mine. And still, there are 2 films that I have ranked above it, and honestly, these 2 could be tied for number 1. But because I have to choose, the next one I'm going to choose is Laputa, Castle in the Sky. Oh my gosh. How much I love this film, I just cannot express. It is amazingly done. It really brings to life all of the characters, and there's so much character development that goes on throughout this film, especially as you get to know Captain Dola. If you haven't seen it, look for Captain Dola. You can't miss her. You really start to see not necessarily a struggle of good versus evil, but you start to see these characters slowly develop and get more depth to them. And some of the other films down here on this list, the characters didn't quite develop as well as they could have throughout the film, or not at all. But Castle in the Sky is a masterclass at character development, and I could not recommend it more. For anyone who wants to watch their first Studio Ghibli film, Castle in the Sky is a great place to start. Personally, for me, number one, Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind. This is consistently ranked as one of the greatest animated films of all time, and justly so. There's just something about this film that I just could not get enough of. Between the music, the plot, the characters, everything about this film I just fell in love with. This is the film that really started it all. And before you start jumping on me that Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind is not technically a Studio Ghibli film, this started Studio Ghibli. It was because of the success of this film that Studio Ghibli got started. And without this film, we may not have all the other films on this list. Now, this isn't a ranking of most deserving films. If it was, Spirited Away most likely would probably be number one for me, followed by Nausicaa and Castle in the Sky. This is just my personal rankings, which ones I felt the most connected to, which ones I would watch again in a heartbeat, just the ones that really connected and resonated with me personally. And Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, honestly, a lot of people can criticize this film based on the lack of plot development between the, I believe, Pedgites and Tolmekians. But what Hayao Miyazaki does so well is that he doesn't give you more information than you need. He tells you enough that you can understand what's going on without getting into too much details and getting right down to the nitty-gritty, for lack of a better phrase. And for me, Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind epitomizes Studio Ghibli. Well, there you have it. Those are my rankings. Which ones do you think I got right? Which ones do you think I got wrong? Tell me in the chat below. Comment below what you think the best Studio Ghibli films are. What are your rankings? Post it below and I'll be sure to check it out. Thanks for watching this, and I'll see you guys next time.